Dike was not the richest trader in Umwagu village, but he was the most consistent. Every market day, just before the first cock crowed, he would already be at his stall near the narrow path that led to the stream. His salt, measured in calabashes and wrapped in old newspapers, never seemed to run out. That was what made people talk. He never shouted like the others or haggled too long. He sat on his short stool, chewing on a stick of bitter cola, watching the world that passed by as his stock disappeared. What puzzled many was that Dike didn't own a car, a donkey, or even a wheelbarrow. No one ever saw him carry fresh supplies into the market, yet his woven baskets were always full. Some said he must wake early to fetch from the salt spring near Njaba. Others said he probably had a secret supplier. Whatever the case, his salt was always there, fine, white, and dry. Adaeze, his wife, had grown used to her husband's quiet nature. He wasn't a man of many words, and he rarely shared details about his business. At first, she thought nothing of it. Not every man liked to carry his wife along in trade matters, especially not men like Dike, who kept things close to their chest. But recently, Adaeze began to notice something strange. The sack he stored in their backyard, the one he claimed to have fetched from the Njaba spring, never seemed to empty. Even after a busy market day, even after selling to the last customer, he never refilled it in front of her. She once asked him casually, "How are you able to sell so much and still have enough for the next market?" He had simply smiled and said, "It's in the blessing, my wife." The next market day, Dike returned with his usual calmness. His sack again was full to the brim. Adaeze watched him leave before dawn and waited by the window all morning. She hoped to catch a glimpse of him returning, but he never did. At least, not through the usual footpath. That night, she tried to stay awake. Dike had dozed off after supper, but around midnight, she noticed him quietly slipping out of bed. He didn't carry a lantern. He didn't put on his sandals. She followed him barefoot through the dew-wet grass, heart pounding. Her husband moved swiftly and confidently through the dark, like someone who had made the journey many times. When he turned past the market square and veered toward the old path leading to the burial ground, her breath caught in her chest. Adaeze ducked behind a large tree, watching from the shadows. The burial ground was sacred, a place avoided at night, not just out of respect, but fear. Yet, Dike walked straight in, unafraid. He disappeared behind the tallest tombstone, the one belonging to the village's oldest priestess. She waited, shivering in silence, until he emerged again, carrying a sack she recognized, his salt sack. But something about the way it bulged now unsettled her. It looked freshly filled. No tools, no donkey, just her husband and a sack of salt, heavy with silence. As he walked back home, Adaeze remained rooted to the spot, staring at the disturbed mound behind the priestess's grave. That was when she realized the salt wasn't from any mine. It was from the dead. Adaeze couldn't sleep that night. She lay awake, staring at the straw roof as questions swirled in her mind. Why the burial ground? Why the salt? By morning, Dike was back to his usual self, eating roasted yam, smiling gently, and setting off to the market like nothing had happened. She said nothing, unsure if what she saw was real. Perhaps she had imagined it. But when she checked the backyard, the salt sack was there, full again. She dipped her hand into it. It felt colder than usual, and her fingers tingled as if touched by ice. She pulled back quickly. That day, for the first time, she didn't go to help him at the stall. Something in her heart had shifted. Adaeze tried to act normal. She cooked. She fetched water. She greeted neighbors. But inside, she watched. Her husband was cheerful, even kinder than usual. He returned that evening humming an old folk song as he counted the coins in his pouch. That night, he offered her a new wrapper, red and gold, for being a good wife, he said. But Adaeze felt no joy. That night, she dreamed of graves opening, salt pouring from the eyes of the dead. She woke in sweat, her heart racing. She no longer doubted what she had seen, but what she didn't understand was why. Why steal salt from the dead? Was it just greed, or was there something deeper, something spiritual? She needed answers, but from where? The next day, Adaeze visited her mother's sister, Mama Ogoli, an old herbalist who lived by the edge of the forest. She didn't mention Dike. Instead, she asked vague questions about salt, about spirits, about burial grounds. Mama Ogoli listened carefully. Salt is not just for food, the woman said, stirring a calabash of herbs. Salt preserves, salt binds, but salt taken from the grave. That's a salt of memory, salt of spirits. It holds the essence of the one buried beneath it. Adaze's breath caught. What happens if someone uses such salt? Mama Ogoli looked at her long and hard. Then the dead will follow, not all at once, but slowly. Surely, spirits don't like to be disturbed. That evening, Dike returned later than usual. His eyes were sunken, his lips dry. He said he was tired. Adaeze watched him closely. The money pouch was heavier than ever, but his body looked worn. As he lay on his mat, his fingers twitched. In his sleep, he murmured strange names. Some sounded like villagers long buried. Adaeze sat beside him, holding a small gourd of water. She whispered a prayer her mother once taught her, covering his body with their wrapper. That night, he didn't rise to go anywhere. But by morning, 2 chickens in their compound were dead. No wounds, no sound, just stiff, cold bodies covered in a fine layer of salt. Rumors began to swirl in the village, not about Dike, but about the burial ground. A grave had burst open. A child collecting firewood had run home screaming. The elders were summoned. The grave belonged to the same priestess Dike had visited. They called it a bad omen. Dike said nothing. He avoided the topic, claiming to be too busy. But Adaeze noticed how he flinched when the town crier mentioned the disturbance. He was more careful now, only leaving the house when no one was watching. And when he returned, he brought more salt than ever. Salt that now left a strange scent in their compound, like dry bones. And rain. Adaeze began to withhold meals, not out of anger, but fear. She worried about the salt he brought into their home, the coins he handed her with pride. Was this blood money in disguise? She kept her distance, cooking her own food separately. Dike noticed but said nothing. One night she found her daughter Nwaka playing with the salt in the backyard, building tiny castles. Adaeze screamed and slapped the child's hand away. That night, Nwaka fell sick, feverish and pale. The local healer said it was a spiritual affliction, not a natural one. Adaeze broke down in tears. She knew then that something had to end, and soon. The healer returned the next morning. "It's not ordinary," she said, tying white cowries around little Nwaka's wrist. "This child touched something she shouldn't have, something that belongs to the land of silence." She didn't mention salt, but Adaeze knew, her heart clenched with guilt and horror. That night, she threw a handful of Dike salt into the fire. The flames hissed and turned blue. For a split second, the room smelled like fresh graves. Dike didn't speak. He only watched her with tired, haunted eyes. "Why are you doing this, Dike?" she finally asked. "Why not just tell me?" He turned away. "You won't understand. No one would, but I owe them. And if I stop, they'll take me." That was the first time Adaeze saw fear in her husband's eyes. Not fear of man, but of something unseen. That night, she waited until he slept, then took a piece of his salt to Mama Ogoli again. The old woman examined it under firelight and spat on the floor. "This salt is not just from the grave, sis," she said. "It is bound to a covenant. Someone has made a deal, trade with the underworld." Adaeze's mouth went dry. "What kind of deal?" The woman leaned closer. "A salt that never finishes means a debt that never ends. The dead give, but they always take in return." Adaeze returned home to find Dike gone again. She rushed to the market, heart pounding. There he was, smiling and selling, laughing with villagers. But his face looked thinner, paler. His hands shook. As she watched, a strange thing happened. A customer poured salt into a wrapper and screamed. Her hands had started bleeding. Dike froze. People rushed in confusion, but Dike quickly blamed it on a sharp stone in the salt. They laughed it off, but Adaeze saw the woman's wrapper soaked in blood. That night, Adaeze begged him to stop. "You're losing yourself." Dike whispered, "I don't own the salt anymore. It owns me." Dike's behavior changed. He started sleep-talking, whispering names of the dead, some from recent burials, some long forgotten. Adaeze heard him say her father's name, who had died 15 years ago. She shook him awake in terror. "What deal did you make?" she shouted. Tears filled Dike's eyes. "When I had nothing, I went to the priestess's grave and begged for success. I promised to share her grave salt if she helped me feed my family. She answered, but I didn't know it would cost everything." That night, their chickens screamed in their cage. In the morning, they found them all dead, with salt poured into their mouths. The village grew uneasy. More grave disturbances were reported. A boy fetching mangoes near the burial ground fainted and woke up with salt in his eyes. An elder fell ill, his skin turning pale and dry like he'd been drained. The villagers summoned the chief priest. Dike was among those who gathered at the square, pretending ignorance. The chief priest spoke slowly. "Someone has broken the covenant of the dead. They have stolen what was buried. Now the dead are stealing back our sleep, our animals, our peace. This salt carries more than taste. It carries voices." Adaeze couldn't breathe. She felt her daughter's wrist, still burning with fever. Adaeze made a decision. She followed Dike one night, quietly, with Mama Ogoli's charm around her neck. He walked the same path again, but this time he didn't go alone. A shadowy figure met him by the grave, a tall, slim woman with white chalk on her face. Adaeze hid behind a tree, heart pounding. She watched as Dike knelt and opened the sack. The woman dipped her fingers in it and smeared salt across his forehead. "The balance is not complete," she said. "Bring more or lose more." Dike cried, "I've given enough." But the woman only hissed, "Then give yourself." The next day, Dike didn't go to the market. He stayed indoors, shaking. Adaeze bathed him with herbs, but he grew weaker. "She's taking from me now," he murmured, piece by piece. His hands trembled as he tried to drink water. Salt leaked from his eyes like tears. Nwaka's fever broke, but she didn't speak for 2 days. When she finally did, she said one sentence. "The white woman was here." Adaeze screamed. She knew the spirit had entered their home. She began a fast. No salt, no cooked food, just dry cola and water. It was time to fight back. Adaeze returned to Mama Ogoli, desperate. She's inside my home now. I feel her. I hear her in my daughter's breath. The old woman stared hard and handed her a gourd with dark powder. Scatter this where the salt is taken. It will break the tie. But be warned, spirits don't live quietly. That night, Adaeze waited, hidden in the trees, just like before. Dike crept toward the grave again, led by something unseen. Adaeze followed with trembling hands. As the ghostly woman appeared from behind the priestess's tombstone, Adaeze leapt forward and scattered the powder in a circle. A scream pierced the night. The spirit staggered backward, her white eyes burning. For a moment, Adaeze thought it was working. But then the wind changed. The spirit flung a gust of dust into her eyes, blinding her. Adaeze fell to the ground as the ghost vanished in smoke. Dike lay unconscious beside the grave. She had failed. The next night, Adaeze tried again. This time, Mama Ogoli gave her a small calabash of river tears, water drawn from a cursed stream where spirits once drowned their victims. If she shows herself, pour this on her chest, but never hesitate. The spirit of delay is a shield. Adaeze followed Dike again, though he looked weaker than ever. The graveyard was colder this time. Even the crickets had gone silent. The spirit emerged without sound, floating above the earth. Adaeze raised the calabash, but her hands froze. The spirit whispered, "You love him. Will you kill what keeps him alive?" In that hesitation, the ghost struck. Adaeze flew backward, crashing against a headstone. The calabash shattered. Dike screamed as his body spasmed violently, salt pouring from his nose. Adaeze wept in frustration. She had failed again, and the spirit laughed as she disappeared into the dark. For 2 days, Adaeze said nothing. She barely ate. She watched over her husband as his life thinned out like smoke. Then, on the third night, she walked alone to Mama Ogoli. "This time, I fight with nothing but truth," she said. Mama Ogoli gave her one final item, a blade made from palm frond dipped in ancestral ash. "This cuts not flesh but lies," the old woman whispered. That night, as Dike rose one final time, Adaeze followed. She didn't hide. She stepped into the graveyard before the spirit even appeared. "Come out!" she cried. "You fed him hope and trapped his soul, but now I take it back." The spirit hissed from the shadows. "You have failed twice. Live while you still breathe." But Adaeze stood tall. "I brought nothing but truth." She raised the blade of ash and began to chant the names of the dead Dike had stolen from, the ones she had learned from her dreams. The wind howled. The spirit charged. This time, Adaeze didn't flinch. She slashed the air, and the blade sparked. The spirit screamed as light burst from the tombs around them. One by one, ghostly hands pulled her backward. "It is done," the wind whispered. Dike collapsed, but this time he opened his eyes with clarity. The salt was gone, the grave was sealed, and Adaeze, breathless but standing, had finally won. Dike didn't speak for 3 days. He simply sat beneath the udala tree in front of their compound, staring into space. The once endless salt sack lay beside him, limp and useless. Villagers passed and stared, but no one dared approach. They could feel it. Something heavy had left him, but something else remained. Adaeze washed him gently each day, whispering words of forgiveness. Nwaka had begun speaking again, though her eyes still darted at shadows. One evening, Dike finally muttered, "I stole from the dead and fed the living. But the dead are patient. They always come to collect." Word of what happened spread. Not the full truth, but enough. That Dike's salt was cursed, that he had disturbed sacred ground, The village elders called him to the square. The chief priest stood beside them. "You broke the law of silence," he said. "You owe not just the dead, but the living you deceived." Some villagers wanted him banished. Others wanted to burn his house. But Adaeze knelt before them all. "He has paid. Our family has paid. Let him serve instead." The priest nodded. "Then he shall carry no salt again. He will serve in the shrine for 7 seasons as a bearer of offerings, never to touch coin or trade again." On the next market day, Adaeze went alone. She stood quietly by the same old stall. There was no salt to sell, just a mat and a small calabash of cola for visitors who asked. She answered each one with grace, never revealing the full truth. Only this: sometimes what feeds us comes from darkness. Be sure you're not eating someone else's sorrow. People wept quietly. Others brought food for her. They had known something was wrong, but never imagined it was this deep. That day, no one asked for salt. They only asked for peace. That night, Nwaka woke from a dream. The woman with the white face was crying. She said softly. She said she didn't want to curse Papa. She only wanted to be remembered. Adaeze held her daughter tight. It dawned on her then. The priestess had once been a woman too. A woman buried and forgotten. Her name washed away by time. Dike's offering wasn't just a mistake. It had awoken a forgotten soul, one who longed to be honored, not used. Dike served in the shrine in silence. He carried water for rituals. He swept the sacred floor. He lit fires but never spoke unless asked. Children mocked him. Traders ignored him, but he bore it all. Each evening, he returned home and placed his head on Adaeze's lap. Sometimes he cried. Other times he simply whispered names of those he had stolen from. It was his penance to remember, to call them back into history. One by one he wrote their names on palm bark and placed them under stones in the shrine. The past would not be lost again. At the end of his 7th season, the village held a new festival, the White Salt Festival. It was not a celebration, but a remembrance. Salt was not sold that day. Instead, people brought handfuls of it to the burial ground, pouring it onto the graves in silence. Dike led the procession, barefoot, with Adaeze and Nwaka behind him. He laid down the final offering, a bowl of salt mixed with river tears. As the wind passed, the trees whispered. The air became still, and just for a moment, the grave of the priestess gleamed. That night, Dike dreamed again, but it was not a nightmare. The priestess stood before him, her eyes gentle. "You remembered," she said. "That was all I wanted." She reached out and touched his forehead. "Salt can preserve, but it can also burn. You learn to use it wisely. Go in peace." He awoke with tears in his eyes, and for the first time in years, no salt on his skin, only sweat, only relief. He was free. A new trader came to the village with sacks of salt, bold and loud. People rushed to him, but Adaeze stood back and watched. When he offered her a discount, she smiled kindly. "Salt is not just seasoning," she said. "It carries memory. I hope you know where yours comes from." He laughed, confused, but the elders nodded. The village had changed. They now asked questions. They didn't just buy taste. They asked for truth. That was Adaeze's legacy. Dike no longer traded, but he became a storyteller. Children gathered under the mango tree as he told tales, not with pride, but with humility. He never used names, never blamed, but his eyes always drifted toward the graveyard. He taught them, the dead are not asleep, they are listening, and every gift from the earth must be respected. Even so, the children listened, wide-eyed. and no one ever played near the burial ground again. Years later, when Adaeze passed, the village buried her near the stream where Dike once claimed to fetch his salt. On her grave, they placed a small calabash filled not with salt, but with palm bark inscribed with names of the forgotten. She was remembered as the woman who stood when her husband fell, the woman who fought a spirit and won, not with weapons, but with truth, the woman who preserved her home, her village, and the memory of the dead. And every year after that, during the White Salt Festival, someone whispered, "Salt may melt, but the spirits never forget." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting tales.